Okay, so one thing that can happen in Animate when you're using a motion tween is regardless of the version you're in, because I've done this twice on two different versions over multiple months and the same thing always happens, is that the timing between the keyframes can get away from you. So, and you saw it happen in the original video with what I was working on. It's happening exactly here, even though different start, different file, different version. And it's that if you look at these little dots where the frames are, like, what is this? Right? What is this over here? This is, I didn't ask for this. I didn't put that there. The program put that there. And this is the type of thing that happens when you have a computer figure things out for you. And you'll remember that when we first set this up, the first keyframes here, and then this one's over here, that worked out beautifully, right? And then the next one, um, wherever we put it, it wanted to go in a different direction. It always wanted to arc this in a different direction. I think that's part of why things are going a little screwy. So how do we fix it? Well, technically there are eases in here, but they go across the whole thing. We don't want that. The only way to get an individualized set of easing onto this is to go into the graph editor. And so we double click the tween in question. And then we expand this down a lot because we need to take a look at what is happening. So, for anyone who has taken any sort of physics or really studied calculus, this is a way to plot on a graph what is happening here in animation. And X motion is separated out from the Y motion. And the way this works is the slope of the graph is how fast this is going. So as it's moving to the right, you're going in positive numbers, so the graph is going up. As it's moving to the left, you're going in negative numbers, so the graph is going down. And the faster it's moving, the steeper the graph. So one of the areas where it just goes like, what is happening right here, where it skips from here to here really quickly, that's this area, right? The graph gets very, very, very steep right there. The other more obvious area is right here. The graph gets very, very steep there. And that's just for the X. That's just for the back and forth. If we were to go to the Y version of this, it's something similar where right at the end it gets really fast. So that's the up and down. So it doesn't move up and down very much for the first two keyframes. Then it moves down quite a lot, which unfortunately, if this is 0, then positive numbers go down. So this is inverted, this chart. But it actually moves up and down pretty steadily according to this. It's very linear. And then it starts off kind of slow and then speeds up towards the end for this part in terms of the Y. And if you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's a lot. Yeah, it is. And it's something, if you're going to be in animation, this is a thing you have to be able to deal with. 3D animation has the exact same thing, just across one more dimension and a whole lot more moving parts at once. So, what do we use it for? Well, very simply, one of the things we can use it for is to get rid of this break. So this is a broken tangent. This is a solid tangent. Tangent is when these two lines are aligned. So we can break this broken tangent, or unbreak this tangent, just by moving one of them. And by doing that, I can adjust this. And if I move this time marker back so I can take a look, now it's going to be working a little bit more smoothly. I can do the same thing here. I don't want to have any vertical tangents, right? A vertical tangent is basically like an unsolvable thing where it just, there's nothing there. Now I don't want to do this either because that's going to change the direction. All right, so I'm going to do this. And what happens is it's still going to go there and back, right? Because the X has to go over here and then back, which is why it goes down and then up again. But instead of a vertical tangent, which was just like infinite quickness, it's now this, which is still quicker. It's still accelerating actually when it goes there. It's still faster here than it is there, and definitely than it is there. And then we can do the same thing with the Y direction. We can take a look and see if we want to. And you can see, that was more obvious. All right, so if I bring this over here. See how that all goes away? And then as I bring this over here, the frames move back. And so with this, I should have much more even motion. It's still going to be slower here because it's taking longer than it is here and here, but it should be substantially more even, right? And if I want it to be even more even, I would take a few frames out of this, starting to space things out a little bit. And so it is slowing down a little here and speeding up a little there. Now, the reality is, when have I ever said make everything even, right? So that took taking the kinks out there took away the glitchiness of this, but really the power in this is in getting some actual eases in. You'll remember we were working with some basic eases over here with the classic tweens. This is that on steroids. This is that turned up to 11. And so the way this works is if I want this to, what do I want this to do? I suppose since it's starting here, I want it to start slower and speed up, right? Like that makes sense. So in order to do that, I have to have this be steeper here and have this be slower here. But not too slow, because if you're doing this, it's not doing anything. Now, here's the trick of it though. You saw I moved this and it moved that one, which like changes everything. We can hold down Alt and we can break the tangents. Unfortunately, you have to keep holding Alt, I think. Yeah, in order to get this to work. Now, that did change the animation a little bit. These two things talk to each other. So if you still want this to wrap around in a circle, right, we do still have to, we're going to have to make a few adjustments, right? So maybe I overcompensated in here. I didn't have to make that quite so sharp, right? But these two things do talk to each other. And the other thing to remember, especially on the outgoing thing here, is that I have a y-axis to deal with. So this doesn't have to be that sharp because it's moving down a lot. So part of the steepness can come from this. All right, and then let's see, we want it to slow down as it comes home. And you can see it updates. So we want this to be a little bit slower. So it is that you can't, I make major changes in one area and updates in the other area, and it's going to be a back and forth. If you really want to have that refined timing of things slowing down, things speeding up, etc., it is going to need, you're going to need to do the back and forth dance quite a bit. I don't even know what I just made, so oh, it's half what I want. So it's slower here until it speeds up, and it slows down here. My problem is this right here. But if I want it, part of what's going wrong here is I have too much time to cover for this amount of ground. If you look at how fast it's going coming into this keyframe and leaving this keyframe, it has to slow down at some point, right? Because I've told it to take a full second between here and here. Well, it shouldn't if it's going fast the whole time. Oh, whoops. There we go. So if I click and drag and I remove some frames, now the graph gets to be steep the whole time for both of these. And you can see it spaced these out a little bit better. Now I can already tell looking at this that I also have too much time in here. So it's going to speed up once it hits this. But it should be pretty continuous over here, which makes me very happy. Ha. So next up, I do have to take a few frames out of here. And what's weird is it doesn't matter if you take them from here or from here. You're taking them from between the two keyframes. And that helped. A couple more. That's starting to look closer to this. And the other thing is these are still pretty crumped together. We don't want them to be any closer together than that, which means I can still remove a few more keyframes And because there's only so steep you can make the graph before it gets a little bit crazy, and there's only so slow you can make it before you're like, oh, it's not moving. And now if we watch it, it does still have a little bit of a thing right there. So I can round that out a little bit. And I am purposely adding the time to this because or adding the space to this because that's where they were too close together. So if things were moving too slowly here, I needed to travel a little bit further. I didn't need this part to travel further. Oh, whoops. Nope, 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 nope. I definitely don't want that. And also if I move this keyframe, I'm changing the distance things move, which changes the speed of them, right? So this is a lot of things happening all at once. Better. That was much better. It's taking a very long time because I haven't saved it and I'm recording my screen. There we go. Still a little bit of a hiccup right there. Now, one thing we can do to deal with that as well is simply not have as many keyframes. I kind of put this together without thinking. If I really want an orbit, I may only have 2 keyframes. Start, well, actually 3 keyframes, excuse me, 2 spans, 3 keyframes. Start, midway, finish, and then that way you can do an ease in from here and an ease out from there, and it'll be pretty continuous. Trying to get 3 spans to work together along one motion, that's a little bit more difficult, right? So there's an extra keyframe going on in here to try and make a very simple circle. We can accomplish this circle without the 3rd keyframe. All right, and if we look at our curves right here, ooh, that's interesting. Ooh, one of them got a little, So going into that 2nd keyframe, got a little more broken than I would have liked. And so I would probably want to adjust the space of this first, bring it back out. I don't want to because there we go. Really round that out. Yes, it does mean my timing changes here, but it's worth it to fix this nonsense. And then figure out how I want the timing to go. This one stayed pretty nice, actually. All right, so it's far more complicated than just choosing the one ease here, but that's because you have multiple spans of animation within one thing. Remember with the classic keyframe, which I'll bring up in a second. All right, so I brought up a classic keyframe, and remember with this one, each of these spans is exactly one set of motion. Now that motion might involve moving and spinning and scaling and turning the opacity on and off. It might involve a bunch of things, but it is exactly one span. And so when you set up an ease, when you go in here and you say, I want there to be an ease in, and I want it to be this, did that catch? Yes. Right? There's only one time span for it to go over, which means when I go to this one and set it up, the two of them can work together pretty well. Whoops, I did it backwards. We want an ease out. Haha. Just kidding. Listen. There it is. Yeah, there it is. Right? Each one has its own simple curve. This way or this way. And so that it can put it across whatever directions things are going in, including this diagonal, which is both an x and a y. Here, we've got a much more complicated set of circumstances because all of these are part of one span, so you have to do your eases and outs between keyframes within one whole giant system, but also because it's got a curve to it, it is changing which of these axes that it's moving on depending on where it is in the curve, right? So you've got there's a lot more math to it basically. These are paths, as I said earlier. This is an anchor point and this is an anchor point, and it's the exact same thing as we've been working with. But all of that math that's been drawing these curves is now going into drawing the animation. So yes, this is more complicated. I better end this video. All right, so these are this is a graph editor. Um, welcome to it. And we're going to be, if you want to really finesse timing on something that's moving in circles, you will need to use this, and you will have to get used to it's going to this affects this. It's an Ouroboros, right? Snake eating itself. And so you have to go back and forth, make some changes, and be willing to sacrifice one part over here if you've decided you need to fix this other part over here.